again, inspiring boys, empowering fathers, making a difference for fathers, and of course, transforming people's lives. And of course, the question we have is, are boys really underachievers? Are they really underachieving? And of course, that's part of what we're going to deal with today. Point that out to people. Go for it, Lynda.
Okay. So, people probably wonder why we think boys are underachieving. And well, Jim, why don't you talk about why do you think boys are underachieving? I mean, you wrote a whole book on it. Some people might not think that. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, what we're seeing is boys performing lower than their potential shows. So, for example, uh, we've got boys who are scoring highly on intelligence and ability tests, which shows a great deal of potential and that they should be high achievers. But in school, particularly, in fact, they are scoring lower than that. And that's been, again, there is background information to support this, but we've got boys scoring lower than they should be. And this has long-term implications for them. And so it's important for people to reach their potential. And none of this is suggesting that boys, when we say they're underachieving, that there's anything wrong with them, except that circumstances are resulting in them performing lower than their ability and intelligence, which suggests they should be able to. So there's a gap here, and clearly it's not a lack of ability or intelligence. So that leads us to the question of, okay, what is it? Why are they not achieving to their potential? And that's very important.
Yeah, and just as we talk about, what are we measuring this with? If you live in Ontario, there's EQAO scores, which you can get. We did post them on our website. You can get them also on the government EQOA website. And the grade 3 scores from 2014 to 2019, girls outperform boys 8 to 10 percentage points in reading and 11 to 13 percentage points in writing, which is really significant and something uh, people and educators need to pay attention to. So we're here to point that out and give you some tips on how to deal with that.
Well, the reality is, in terms of ability and intelligence and so on, they should be achieving pretty much on a parallel, but they're not. And so we need um, that are causing that. And that brings us to the question of how do we know? Well, underachievers are more likely to be those that have poor literacy skills, and that's something that we're going to talk about. What can we do to deal with these literacy skills? And they're very often weak readers, and they often end up identified as having learning disabilities. And the point is, they're not generic learning disabilities. Frankly, they are learning disabilities that the evidence would suggest are come to play simply because of the way the school system operates. And we will deal with that in subsequent sessions. And they're often identified as having ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and end up labeled for life as having that and end up on prescription drugs for the rest of their lives. And the point is, the reality is that isn't really a factor. It shouldn't be happening. And when research was done, for example, at a Stanford University, they looked at how they could reduce the number of people identified with ADHD. And lo and behold, what did they discover? They discovered that if you didn't give people expectations to be able to do things that they weren't at a developmental stage to do, they didn't end up with ADHD. So in fact, the way we're operating systematically, and we're doing that partially in the home, partially in our society, and of course, partially in our education system, if we adjust those things, we can eliminate 70+% of cases of ADHD. So, do we want to solve the problem? Well, if we want to solve the problem, we need to use techniques that we're going to show you. We can do things early in a boy's life that will prevent him from having a long-term handicap that'll affect him for his entire life. And of course, a great deal of that is this whole issue of underachievement. So that's part of what we're going to be dealing with today and over the next few sessions that we do. So if you want to help your young son to experience greater success in life, have a look at what we're about to present. Right, Lynda, let's go for it.
Absolutely. So I think what happens in a lot of cases is that boys then get trapped into a vicious cycle. And I think we can talk about that. What happens when boys are underachieving? Well, the first thing is there's lack of success at school. So when they're struggling, it stands out. And of course, what happens is then the teacher starts saying, "Oh, wait a minute, this child is falling behind. They're not meeting what they can meet." So that's one of the first signs I would think that happens when you see this. And of course, that would lead to feelings of inadequacy. So if a child sees himself falling behind the other students, and the teacher's pointing it out, his parents start pointing it out, then I'm sure he would start feeling a lot of inadequacy. And of course,
And for some people, this is incredibly important that uh, they begin to feel like losers really early on. And uh, it's not like having a broken arm that people can see. These are feelings that are inside. And however, they influence what we're doing.
then of course, you end up with a real debilitating stress. If we think about ourselves as adults, when we're in a meeting or in a social situation and we start feeling inadequate and you keep feeling that way every day, I'm sure that must make you feel very stressed, and children don't know how to deal with their emotions, and they're learning, they're children. And so I'm sure that the stress must just be very debilitating. Would you say that, Jim?
I would for sure. And of course, one of the problems that comes out of this, and this goes back to this whole issue of ADHD. Um, Obviously, if you're dealing with this stress and not coping in this situation, um, the tendency is to begin to act out and and do things you think you can do when in fact you feel like an awful lot of the things you're expected to do you can't do. Stress is a big factor, and I think as adults we're certainly familiar with what stress can do to us, but it also does it to children too, and it's important for us to be aware of it.
And of course, stress, as we all know, leads to depression. And do children get depressed, Jim? Would you think as a child, would they feel depressed once they get into this cycle? We talked about this being like a vicious circle.
Oh yeah, depression is an issue, and um, certainly the medical profession, as they study this issue, are very conscious of the fact of what happens in terms of stress causing depression. Um, and the medical profession is very, very aware of it and has ways to deal with it. However, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that the answer isn't what drugs can we give this person, what pills can we put them on. We need to start looking at how we can make a difference right in the beginning, and that goes back to the whole issue of underachieving and the effect it has in terms of success at school.
And of course, as we all know, as adults, we've had many sleepless nights, stressing about, the next day and What am I going to face tomorrow? What more things am I going to fail at? And what are people going to say about me? And that spirals into a lot of difficulty sleeping. And that
And
takes
of
us.
course, that lack of sleep and difficulty sleeping makes your problem of lack of success at school even worse. And as adults, we have to deal with this as it affects us, but it's affecting our children too. And frankly, I'm not a great advocate of saying, fine, we're going to deal with a sleeping problem by again getting a prescription for pharmaceuticals. I think we need to be looking at what we can do to prevent that underachievement in the first place. And as we do that, the whole cycle we have here improves. We get better at all of it. So, okay, what's next?
And we mentioned before, the three key areas are parenting practices, which we're going to talk about next, societal influences, and of course the education system, which is quite a biggie.
But the parenting skills that dads have a tremendous impact on boys. It really is very, very important. And we very often, I'm speaking now as a dad, we very often aren't conscious of that, and very often tend to say, "Well, mom will take care of that." Well, I'm sorry, folks, but dad needs to take care of it too, because particularly it's true for children, boys and girls, but it's particularly true of boys, and I think dads need to be very conscious of that. So we'll look at parenting styles of dads, and you'll see some of these things uh, on the sheet here now. And one of them is the whole idea that, and there's a lot of research on this, a lot of very relevant research on the fact that a dad should speak face to face with infants. I'm not saying you have to speak face to face with every child, but with infants, it's very, very important. And Lynda, I think you can speak to this one about what the research is telling us around particularly what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, I found this very interesting because I never really thought about it before. Because we all, look at babies and we, make faces at them and talk to them. And but I didn't realize, I thought it was just a cutesy thing, like, oh, look at the baby, isn't he cute, but it actually has an impact. So babies really need to see, and children as well, but infants need to see that face to face, and it actually helps them with language development because they watch your lips move, and it helps them decode speech. They learn how to pronounce things by looking at how your lips move. It has an impact on both social and emotional development, like smiles and frowns. And so they hear how you're talking to them, and then they see your face. So they can make the connection. Oh, when I see that face, that's a happy face. When I see that face, that's a sad face. And it really helps them emotionally and socially develop later on as they grow into children and adults. Um, and, eye contact and face mirroring helps them form strong bonds. So this is something for dads to know. If you're looking at face to face with your child, that helps create a bond with the person and with the dad that they're talking to. And, we want sons and daughters to have that bond with their dad just as much as with their mom. I didn't realize it was such an important thing. But what happened during COVID, because we're all started wearing masks, and they've done some research now, and what they found, this was done in the UK, the US, and to some extent in Canada, that there's been an increase in speech delays and speech therapy we're seeing in young children that were babies and young children during the COVID, because people around them had masks on. They couldn't see the face. And it shows, also causes them social anxiety. Because you see someone wearing a mask, it's like, it increases their shyness, their anxiety towards strangers, takes them longer to recognize facial emotions as well. So there's a lot of concerns that they've discovered that's happened. The damage has been done with COVID to children.
But you see, we're talking now about something that I, as a dad, can do that will help my boys in their whole lives, but I can do with my infant children, and that will have significant difference. That has no cost, and doesn't take a huge amount of time, doesn't take a lot of skill. It makes a big difference. So it's not just a question of speaking to your infant. It's really important with infants that you speak to them, and they can see you as you're speaking to them, and you see them as you're speaking to them. So again, I go back to uh, this is something that makes a difference, doesn't cost anything, isn't difficult to do, doesn't require a lot of training, something to think about. And that brings us to our next one, and where we talk about literacy skills. You know, it's important that children develop strong literacy skills. It doesn't mean that we need to teach our children to read, that is, decode words, at really early ages. It means that we need to talk about the wide range of what literacy means. So, for example, if I read to my son, or my sons plural, that's part of my son getting used to the idea of hearing language, hearing words, hearing stories, and that's part of developing literacy skills. And then added to that, if I listen to them read, if they can, or if I listen to them telling me a story, telling me a story, and that goes back to asking them to project, what do you think is going to happen next in this story that I'm reading to you? So it's part of engagement, it's part of making predictions and so on, and these are all part of literacy skills. And we read to our sons, and we speak to them, and we ask them questions. See, even when a child is playing, even when your little boy's out there playing with his trucks, he doesn't go deaf. He's still listening to you. He still hears you. The fact that he's not sitting on your lap at this particular point, but in fact appears to be doing something else, doesn't mean he can't hear you. So and that's very important, because people very often give up on reading to their boys because they don't appear to be paying attention. That's not the point. They are paying attention. They do hear the same as we do as adults. So that's important. And that's all part of this whole idea of helping a child to develop critical thinking, listening, imagining, storytelling, interpreting. And this is all part of the wide range that when we talk about literacy skills. It doesn't only mean I can decode the words on the page. I need to understand what those words are telling me, and I need to think about them, and I need to engage with them. And this is all part of improving literacy. And that makes a big difference, and it's a lifetime difference. And again, it doesn't require a lot of money. It doesn't require a lot of skills. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. It's just a question of looking at the parenting style I'm using. What am I, as a parent, how can I change some of the things I do as a parent that has been shown to make a difference? So this is what we're talking about. That brings us to the next thing.
Okay.
Go for it, Lynda.
Yeah, interesting point about boys. Boys are very active. So yeah, it's interesting that you say they're still listening. It's hard to think that. Those of us that have sons know little boys like to run around and play with trucks.
Yeah.
It's good to know they're listening. I think the important thing is the other thing is to see, they need to see their dads reading. They see their dads get up and go to work or go out and work on his car or do the gardening or whatever, but do we actually see dad sitting and reading? Even if it's a newspaper or magazine, let your sons see dad reading, because they need to see a male role model, someone that they can see, reading. That's not just mom, not just the female teacher. Dad reads. Oh, look at that. Well, maybe I should read too, because I want to be like dad. The funny thing is, I was out on a walk this morning. And do some reading.
But if they only see mom reading, then it's something women do, and it's something men don't do. and that has long-term impacts. So it goes back to literacy skills, but it has long-term impact. So it's not expensive. It doesn't take a lot of skills, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. But it's important that your boys, particularly, actually see you reading. And as Lynda has just said, um, it doesn't have to be everything under the sun, but they need to see that that's something that men do, and therefore it's something I'm going to want to do as a boy because, hey, I want to be like dad. Super stuff, Lynda. I like this. Good.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into what we were going to talk about. What do they need to see? And we just said identifying men and boys reading. The other thing is, it's interesting, is finding some reading material that have male characters that they can identify with, right? Boys don't want to read about princesses and magic castles and Barbies, and nothing wrong with those things, but they're for girls. They want to see, male characters that they can say, oh, I want to grow up and be like that. Whether it's you know, Tommy the Tank Engine, right? Having, or whether it's, Harry Potter. There's a whole wide range of things where there's a male character, and starting as at a young age. And Jim, I think you wrote some children's books with boys as male characters, didn't you?
I did, and that was the reason that I did, because what I found out from dealing with the publishers, uh, they publish about 10 times as many books that are really geared for girls as they do for boys. And when I pursued that with them, the answer I got back was that's because uh, adults buy about 10 times as many books for girls as they do for boys. So I ended up, since I couldn't find, and the people I was associated couldn't find many books for boys that had male characters that were key characters, I ended up writing some. And so if you're interested at all, you can look these up on Google, but you'll find that I have a number of books out that talk about the adventures of Jack and Gizmo. Gizmo is, I hate to tell you this, but Gizmo is a cat. And he has a fan club and gets a fan mail. But anyway, so there's a series of books called The Adventures of Jack and Gizmo. And there's one called The Adventures of Jamal and Gizmo. And you'll understand that Jack and Jack and Jamal are, although they're both boys, they have different characteristics, and you can draw your own conclusions on that. And the third set is The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo, Jay being an Aboriginal boy. And so these are all an opportunity for books that deal with topics that boys are interested in, but also deal with the fact that the key characters that they're looking at are characters they can identify with. So they can identify with Jack, they can identify with Jamal, they can identify with Jay, and it's entirely possible in today's world that some of them may identify with Gizmo. Sorry. I couldn't pass up that opportunity.
Well, you're covering the whole spectrum there, Jim.
I am for sure.
Yes. And yeah, I think that's great. I've seen them, and it's really great to read them with your young sons, and help them see what it's like to be a boy. So that's great. You can also find Jim's books and some other books, list of books on our website. We set them up there by age. So you can take a trip to the library. It's an outing you can do with your son. Again, doesn't cost any money. Go there, and you can either read with him at the library, or take some books home and read with him, whatever.
Personal ownership of books. And you see, again, the research tells us that, and I might add, parental experience tells us that children end up with an opportunity to own a book. It's my book. It matters to me, even though I can't read it. but someone can read it to me. So like, Dad, could you read my book for me, please? And I can also, going on based on pictures and so on in the book, tell you the story of what's in the book, but it's my book. And I now develop an affinity for books, a connection with books. And that's of fundamental importance when children arrive at school, because a school puts a lot of value on the fact that being able to read and having and wanting to be around books is very important in terms of how our education system works, whether you agree with how it works or not. It is how it works, and so it's really important that and when it comes to personal ownership of books, well, hey, if you think you might like some of the books that I mentioned, that is the books that I've written, let us know. I'll send you some. Just give us a mailing address and I'll send them to you free. No problem at all. But um, it's important that children develop that affinity for books, boys particularly, because girls are already inclined to do that because of the way books are marketed and sold and so on. But it's really, really important for boys. And again, Lynda, as you mentioned, it's not a cost factor because we can do these things from the local library. We can do them. We can buy them at secondhand stores and so on. It's not a cost factor, and it goes back to the whole idea that we need to change some of the things we're doing as parents that don't require a lot of skills, don't require a lot of training or anything, but that have been shown to make a difference for boys in the long run. All right, Lynda, back to you.
Well, that's great. And just to sum everything up, we found this document on HarperCollins publisher site, and this basically talks about things that Jim and I have been talking about, and it really hits you when you look at these, and why literacy is so important at a young age. So there's a couple things on there that we did talk about. 15 minutes a day of reading adds 1 million words in a year. That's just phenomenal. I didn't even realize that. Reading to a child daily puts them a year ahead of those who aren't being read to, and that's important because that feeds into.
Wonderful. Well done.
Wonderful. Good.
Like
so
it.
What's up next, Jim?
Whoa, now we're going to the next podcast. We're going to have a dad on with us, one who has 2 young boys, and he's going to discuss his experiences. And he'll be looking at some of the things that we've talked about, and he'll be able to comment on which of these things he's tried, whatever success he's had with them, which of the things he hasn't tried, but hopefully will be trying. So we're going to look at a definite practical example. Lynda has a boy, but you know what? He's not an infant anymore. And I have 3 boys, and they're not infants anymore either. So we're going to get a dad on here who's got young boys, and he's going to talk about his experiences, and he'll challenge us. I'm sure, and he'll be able to talk about what he's tried and what he's planning to try. So I think the next podcast is going to be especially
So, and along with that, send us your comments, as you can see on the screen, and inspire boys at menandfamilies.org. We really want to hear from you. We want to know what you think. What do you want to hear about? Fill in our survey. If you don't have a copy, just send us an email and we'll send it out to you. And also, Jim's book, Rescuing Our Underachieving Boys, is also available. It's a great book, lots of research, and walks through all the things that we have and will be talking about.
And we'll send you a free one.
Wow, Jim, that's great.
No cost. No cost. Get in touch with us. We'll send you one.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for joining us today. I hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you next month.